What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed. And you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blood Moon Box, a monthly subscription box service for period pads and tampons to help support all humans who have a cycle for that time of the month, and no need to run to a store to mix and match period supplies that don't cater to the entire ebbs and flows of your cycle. There are 2 box options based on your cycle, light and medium, and then heavy. And in addition to the period products, you'll also receive PMS herbal teas, a candle, and some other items for your time of the month. You can reserve a box by navigating to bloodmoonbox.com. And bloodmoonbox.com is on a mission to destigmatize the idea of period blood. At Blood Moon Box, they believe that it is the time to honor the enchanting magic within every person who has a cycle. So join us in embracing the magic of your cycle with Blood Moon Box. Hi, my name is Yasmin Terehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Today's episode is about the works of Neville Goddard and how to manifest. With Jerry Emeka, Jerry has experience playing small, feeling misunderstood, struggling in love and business, and saying hard goodbyes. And by utilizing the teachings of Neville Goddard and the law of assumption, he's coached clients to create breakthroughs in career advancement, highly stressful circumstances, overcoming self-doubt, and traumatic events. And he's worked with top-level executives and even stay-at-home mothers. But if you were to ask him what he is really about, he enjoys spending time with his family and friends on the farm or beach, reading spiritual classics from eras past. I'm so excited to welcome Jerry to the show. I heard about him through a former guest, Renee Garcia, who had a podcast episode with him, and I was really moved by what he had to say. So welcome to the show, Jerry.
Hey, Yasmin, how's it?
I'm so happy to welcome you to the show, Jerry. So to kick it off, what is your opinion on how our thoughts, beliefs, and values all impact our life?
Well, there's nothing that's going on external to ourselves that wasn't first going on within ourselves. So the thoughts and beliefs and assumptions that we have of ourselves within ourselves actually expresses itself on the screen of space. So what you're saying to yourself about yourself, or what you're saying to yourself about somebody else, is proved by the external reality that we interact with.
So let's like double click on that because I think for a lot of people, they sort of look to external reality and sort of play defense with life. And I love your work because you studied Neville Goddard extensively. You studied a lot of other people in this field. So can you tell us a little bit more about, what are some tools and frameworks that you've used in the past to help people kind of manifest and also get their thoughts in order? Because I think that's really where it starts, right?
Mm. Yeah. So I came to discover for myself, really because of Neville Goddard, that the stories and the things I'm saying um, are what's creating my reality. It actually blew my mind. I was like, wait, I'm actually telling myself a story right now. That's why this is happening to me. Um, and it was mind blowing. And I didn't quite understand it when I first discovered it. So, I had to really dive deep and of course, study other people and this, and the other. But I kept finding myself coming back to Neville, where he would say that you could just assume you already are the person you want to be. You don't actually have to fight and make the external world make change to change within. And it again like blew my mind, and I started changing, or I started seeing changes in my external world, my relationships, the type of jobs that I was having, all the things. And it really was attributed to what I was imagining, like Neville would teach. And so when it came to working with others, that's where it became. I started getting really curious about what is it that we are imagining, what is it that we're saying to ourselves about ourselves, and witnessing how that actually it just shows up in people's body language. It shows up in uh, their form of speech. Basically they're everybody's expressing constantly their own concept of themselves and don't realize it. And once you wake up to that, you start to realize that you can actually change within and then see the change on the outside. And I often say this, um, it's exactly what Michael Jackson was singing about in Man in the Mirror, which is, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. And it's everybody sings it, everybody hears it, but no one really understands how to go about doing that. And that's what Neville Goddard was really great at explaining, at least to me. So I don't. Does that answer the question?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you said a couple things that I think are really important to Neville's work. You said, assume you are the person that already has a thing. I'm
Hmm.
kind of paraphrasing what you said. And then you also talked about your concept of self, your self concept. I want to talk about those two things because the sort of the law of assumption is something that Neville Goddard really, I don't know if he created it but he speaks about it in depth. Tell us again a little bit more about like the assumption piece and how you coach people or how you've used that in your own life. Because for people who are listening, I'd love for them to have like a tangible example
Hmm.
of how they can, or you can even create an example for people who, I don't know, want to become something, right? Like how would they assume
Hmm.
and then how would they shift their self concept?
Got it. So it's actually really simple. That's one of the most difficult things about it, is that it's actually super simple. Um, right here, right now, as whoever's listening to this is listening to this, you right now are imagining something about yourself. It could be, I'm confused, or it could be, I get this, or it could be, um, uh, God, I'm so frustrated right now. There's a statement that you are saying to yourself right now, and that statement you are assuming is true right now. And because you're assuming it's true, it doesn't go to the past. It actually goes to the future. And the more you can actually catch yourself assuming something, to be true, you can stop it in its track and choose to assume something different. Now, how could you apply this to your life? Let's say, uh, let- um, let's say it is that you want uh, you want a little bit more respect in your job, maybe a promotion. Let's say you want a promotion in your job, but right now you have an assumption that the way you're going to get that promotion is if you work harder by doing XYZ thing. And the more you do XYZ thing, you might notice that it doesn't seem like you're getting any closer to your outcome or your goal, or you're more frustrated and you're just feeling exhausted by the external actions that you're taking. Well, you actually have an assumption underlying what's happening right now. And that assumption is, I have to do this to get that, as opposed to a new assumption that would say, I'm already, I already have the promotion. I'm already in the new office, or I'm already in the new job. Just start assuming it right now. Just assume it's true. That's another way I coach it. Just like right now, hey, let's just assume it's true. Let's just assume you have the job of your dreams. Just right now. Now, if it was true that you were this person, how would you feel? Maybe you would feel some relief, or maybe you would feel um, a sense of like pride, maybe, or this is it, like that feeling of, yeah, that's it. Okay. Now, let's assume that's true, that you are in that state, that you already are that man or woman. Okay. Now, let's persist in that feeling that we just experienced. Now, we're going to persist in the assumption that this is true, despite the fact that what's happening out here says otherwise. So, somebody would say to me, yeah, but Jerry, you don't understand. Like, I've been really working at this for a long time. And I would say, okay, that's cool. But how does that feel to assume that that's true? And they would likely say, oh, it feels painful. I feel angry. I feel sad about it. I feel frustrated. And I was like, okay, where do you feel that in your body? Where does that show up? Or how do you breathe as the person who's frustrated and lacking or whatever? Right. And then you just come back to the new assumption. Oh, wait, no, I'm already in the job of my dreams. Let's just assume it's true. There's a feeling there, and you'll feel it in your body or feel it in your breath. And as you go back and forth between the two assumptions, you'll start to dwell more in the assumption of the wish fulfilled by choosing to dwell there, by choosing to assume it. And once you assume it, it becomes you just it just becomes part of you. And then you go into your day, you go to your day to day, you go back to doing whatever it is that you're up to, or you maybe you come up with new ideas and you follow through on those. I'm not quite certain, because the fact of the matter, the way the law actually works is, if you truly are that person, you wouldn't be worried about what to do or what actions to take. You'd be compelled to take actions. You'd be compelled to say things. You'd be compelled to show up differently, automatically, even. That's how I would walk somebody through that. I know that I know I'm saying that it sounds like I'm going on, but it really is that simple. And it's the repetition and the persistence in the assumption, that actually makes it come to pass. You don't need to attract anything. You don't need to force anything to happen. It's really something you're doing within yourself.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think a lot of times people will say, "Well, I tried this thing, but then, the outside world isn't giving them the clues that they want, or like the sort of external reality isn't validating this new state." And I even noticed that in my own life because I've been manifesting a lot of really awesome things this way. But I noticed that sometimes when I have conversations with people who are not reflecting back that new state, I actually notice it's like something within myself, right, that is like out of alignment rather than focusing on the other person. But I'm curious, like, what do you tell people when when the outside world is giving them pushback and they've gotten off track?
Um, well, a number. I mean, it depends on the circumstance, but I would ultimately just say, "Hey, no, this is absolutely perfect," because it is. Because this is the perfect opportunity for you to assume something new. Do you really want to continue telling that story? And usually most people don't. It really is as simple as that, as choice. One of my mentors, who actually was a student of Neville's back in the day, he would laugh. He would just say, "Well, how long do you want to choose that?" Because the thing is, the stories aren't going to the past. That's the thing. Like, the longer we dwell on these stories and these feelings, the more we're going to get more of it, and then we'll be like, we don't recognize our harvest, and we're like, why is this happening to me? And we're like, it's happening to you because you keep asking why it's happening to you.
So, how do you coach people to persist in the state? And, you know, I think
hmm
that's the thing. It's like the repetition piece that you speak about, the sort of resiliency piece. How do you get them, or how do you coach people to persist?
So that's a great question, actually. So the coaching really comes with getting them to start to notice as often as possible that they are choosing something. And usually, the way I go about doing that is to have them really become in practice of just catching themselves thinking or saying something, and then ask, "Huh? Well, what do I want now?" Um, Another way I coach folks is to just give themselves a week, no condemnation whatsoever, but give themselves a week to just look at what look at your limiters, look at what you believe to be true, and just allow them to be true. Just and then it like and by that I mean just write them down. No condemnation, no guilt, no shame, just like, huh, how about that? That's something I think is true. And I get them to check in with that. And if you're working with me, we worked on this together, as a day-to-day type of thing. But for the most part, you can do this on your own where, all right, today I'm just going to observe what's going on. And you do that for 7 days. Now, once you get to that point, you can have probably by the end of that week, you would have realized what you actually want to be saying to yourself. And then the next week, you start catching yourself saying the things you do want to be experiencing. Notice I didn't say do affirmations to make it happen. It's rather start noticing how you are already saying those things to yourself. Oh, this is perfect. Oh, it's no big deal. Oh, here we go. Whatever it is that is true to you, authentic to you. Now, if you were able to do that for another week, it would absolutely shift everything. It is a little bit more difficult than that, right? You have to be accountable to yourself and this and the other. And I'll tell you this, your old man does not want to die.
Totally. Totally.
So,
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, I could go on, Yasmin. So I forget that I'm on an interview.
No, please. I actually really love kind of the deeper reflections of these questions. And so, wherever that takes us, let's go there. I mean, I think the piece for me, which is interesting, is like location. I travel a lot for
Hmm.
in my personal kind of lifestyle, and so I noticed that sometimes because the places I travel to are so culturally so different, that sometimes my inner state will just sort of have like this like recalibration. And so it's a really good practice though when you're constantly shifting locations. But I'm wondering, what do you say to people who might be in a space or a place that they don't feel, or that maybe the immersiveness of that place is out of alignment? How, like, would you recommend that they kind of move to another place for most of the day? Like, what sort of coaching would you give people if they,
That's a
based on location?
great question. That's actually a fantastic question. So you're really into intuition, correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. If you're finding yourself in a quote unquote incongruent state of being, it's yourself telling yourself, I'm not where I want to be within myself. So if that's true, where else is there for me to go except for within myself? There's nothing external to what's going on here, right? Remember, if we're trying to change it on the external, it's only going to give us more of what's going on within, which is frustration or incongruency in this any other. So if we right here, right now, just stop, breathe, and assume that there's congruency here, that there's peace here, just assume it. There might not be proof on the external, but I don't need proof on the external. Right here, I'm in a new place. I don't know anyone. I feel alone. I feel just lost. And feel that. Allow that to be true, right? Because it's an assumption that you currently have. That's fine. No condemnation. Breathe. And then ask yourself, what do I want to experience now? What would I like to assume is true? I would love to assume that, man, I'm totally connected. I would love to experience, love or understanding or whatever. And you give yourself that. Just assume that you're congruent and allow it to be true, right? And just just see yourself out there in the world. Look at all the people. Sure, maybe it's a culture you're new to, but it's still your people.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so assume congruency, assume this inner peace state, and then the outside world will reflect itself back. I
Yeah,
think
without you having to do anything.
I like this question, what do I want to experience now? I find that for most people, they don't actually know the answer to that question. It's like, wait, what? I get to choose? So much of, I think, our modern culture is based on this like reactive,
Mm,
space of just like reacting to life rather than having this concept of agency. So I really love this idea and this question of like, what would I like to assume as true? Um, so okay, so I'm also like curious, what about feelings and emotions? How
mm,
do they kind of come into the equation?
great. So, I would say this again. I'm not. I'm just going to speak from experience. I'm not a researcher or a scientist. I'm just an artist, really. But I would say this about emotions first. Your emotions are actually it's like your it's like your signal system telling you that it's just signaling you that you're on the right track or off the track. So if you're feeling anger, it's based usually that's based in fear. Um, and so it's showing you something. I'm angry right now, but it's not, remember, it's not something external to you that's causing you to feel anger. You're feeling anger. So something's going on within you And once you've shifted that and found the peace on the other side of it, you can then come out to the external world and interact with it accordingly. Let's say that you're feeling this feeling of euphoria, right? You're feeling so happy and exuberant. Let's say you're at the amusement park or doing something you really love, and you're just like, oh my god, this is awesome. Oh, it's your birthday. You know that feeling on your birthday, and you're just like, oh my god, everything's perfect and wonderful. It's showing you something. It's showing you that you are within yourself, like completely like in line with yourself. That's why you're so, you're so giving on your birthday, right? You're just like, oh, you shouldn't have had, oh, you didn't have to do that, but please, and all that, right? It's showing you something that's going on within you. Now, one of my friends, she'll say, she'll go, why don't we just do this why don't we just have our birthday every day? And I'm like, and it's not about the like positive thinking. That's not what I'm saying here. It's the emotion is showing you something that you believe to be true right now. That's it. All right. So that's the emotion. Now, feelings and emotions are not the same thing. This is one thing I've really come to understand. Feeling is the it is that sensation within of what's actually going on. Feeling is that sensation. You feel it. It's not an emotion. You feel emotions. You feel your phone or your keyboard. You can feel them. You're interacting with them. There's a knowing that's happening. And if you can understand that concept, you'll really be able to recognize that you aren't your feelings and you aren't your emotions. You are the one emoting and you are the one feeling. And by feeling, again, that's that knowing, that's that interaction, that's that intimacy with the emotions, that's that intimacy with the external world, including your body.
Hmm. Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people get stuck in their emotions and their feelings, and oftentimes just kind of stay there in
Hmm.
like a state, right? And actually, I think this is maybe a good time to talk about states. Like, what does it mean to be in a state according to Neville Goddard?
One of my favorite topics. uh, yeah, a state is a body of beliefs. Well, I'll say it this way: a state of consciousness is a body of beliefs, thoughts, actions, reactions, and demonstrations in the world. So your state, you can determine what your state of consciousness is based on your reactions to life. That's a direct quote from Neville. You can you can start observing how you're reacting to life, and you'll know who you are essentially, or who you say you are. And your self concept is who you say you are. And so think of it this way: it's like when you are just like feeling on top of the world, feeling like your most exuberant. There's a lot more ease and flow when you have that concept of yourself. But when you have a concept of yourself that uh, this is hard, I can't do it, I'm such an imposter, there's a sluggishness that attaches to that state of consciousness, right? But if you can make the assumption that you already are XYZ, you'll start to notice whether your reactions match that or match this other state of consciousness that you don't want to be. Does that make any sense, Yasmin?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit further, though?
Well, so that's another thing. It's just like I get to this place. I'm like, I'm not quite certain if I'm conveying this well with folks, because again, it's really simple, and it can be so easy to try to go deeper than it needs to be.
Like we're over intellectualizing it. Like we're not
Yes.
implementing it. We're just sort of like staring at it. That's the concept, which I think, I mean, I think I understand. So like how you react to life is who you are. So if you like your state kind of your state is like a set of kind of beliefs, values, how you show up in the world,
Hmm.
and it allows, I think, you to move through the world at kind of a different pace, almost
Hmm.
like in a different way. That's the way I understand it.
That's a good understanding, actually, because there's you recognize the flow that a lot of mystics talk about, where it's you recognize that you actually are one with all that is happening. It's just that before you were so mucked up with your own like veil of doubt, worry, frustration, poverty, uh, uh, lovelessness, all those type of things, not realizing that it was actually you choosing those when in fact you actually already are peace. You already are rich. You already are healthy. You already are congruent just by being here now, just by being here. It's when we start to intellectualize why something's happening to us that gets us down a rabbit hole of proving why this thing is happening to us. And but if you can just slow down and recognize that, nope, we're all like actually we're taken care of. We're provided for. There is peace here. I have intuition. I have imagination. I have my breath. I'm here. What else do I need to assume? Okay. And then go there. Just allow it to be true. You've allowed the negative stuff to be true, unwittingly, of course, no condemnation. But at what point do you decide that, wait a minute, I am already that which I want to be? I don't need to prove it to anybody. I don't need anybody to prove it to me.
I love that so much. One thing I remember you saying on a podcast that I listened to was also just like you said, you wake up and you sort of decide how you want to feel at the end of the day. And
Hmm.
I just, I've been actually using that. And to be honest, I was like, I don't know how fast this is going to change. We'll see. And it was kind of profound what happened when I started practicing that principle. And of course, I chose the state of what I wanted to feel at the end of the day and all the feelings that came along with it. And I love that exercise because I think it's maybe a simple way for people to also implement this without thinking so far into the future. It's like, just start today. Like, how do you want to feel at the end of the day? Right.
Yeah.
And then so diving deeper into that, because I love that so much, what is your kind of morning routine or evening routine when it comes to manifestation? Like, what do you do for yourself to kind of move the needle forward? Especially because I think a lot of people who are teaching this work are often practicing on themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I guess I've never actually even thought about that. That is true. We are practicing on ourselves, aren't we? How else can you teach?
Yeah.
Um, uh, but yeah, my morning routine, it changes, it varies. But the fact of the matter is, I definitely do that exercise. That's a no, that's a no brainer. That's just how I operate now. But I mean, my morning routine's pretty, I don't know, normal, I guess. I wake up, I do my I call it my meditation, but that's exactly what I do. I just go to the end and see that the day is going great. I don't know how it's going to go great because sometimes that's not necessarily provable. But yet and still, I do it, and I'll tell you this: on the mornings I don't do it, uh, it's not that my days are like bad or anything, but it's just like, oh yeah, there's a lack of essence in my day.
Mm.
That's the best way I would say it. There's a lack of essence in the day. But in the evening, as you're asking this, I do need to get back in practice of this, but in the evenings, this is definitely what I recommend to my clients is I revise. I look back on my day and I learned this from one of my mentors, which is imagine that the day went. So you take what was bad and you make it good. You take what was good and you make it great. And you make what was great, you make it fantastic. And if you can get in practice of doing that right before you go to bed at night, you're more than likely going to go to bed in a pretty good mood and have an easier time waking up in the morning, imagining that the day went the way you want it to be. And now the thing is, now this is where I can get sciencey about it, but this is where your reticular activating system. Are you familiar with that? The reticular activating system?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Yeah. This is where your reticular activating system kicks in and looks for proof as to why your day went so good and wonderful. You get it?
Mm, yeah, I love that. I love that. So revision. So you revise, and I've never heard that before, like going from good to great, great to fantastic, and kind of shifting, moving things that, because like even if you had kind of a normal day, you could always make it better, right? Like you could always make it better in
100%.
your mind. And I
How
love.
how was your lunch? Was it good? Yeah, it was good. But man, wasn't it great? Oh my God. Yeah, that dressing was just, oh, why not? Think about it. Why not do that? Because we're doing it anyways. That's another thing that I wanted to make sure that I was pointing to people was we're doing this anyways. We might as well do it consciously and do it fantastically. Why? Because in my case, I'm 41 and most of my life I was imagining worse. You know what I mean? Like it was just like,
Mm,
oh yeah, how was your day? Oh, it's fine. But was
mm,
it, if you really just looked at any of your days, was it really just fine? No, the sun came up, the birds flew, your children laughed, your wife was wearing that sexy dress. Like, there's so many things that we just take for granted and forget to pay attention to that we forget that the awe of God and life are here. So, why don't we use our imagination to imagine better than the best of our day? We do it anyways. Now we're doing it consciously.
that's so cool. I love that so much. What about you encountering like, kind of curmudgeons or people who
Mm,
are,
I'm friends with curmudgeons.
aren't we all? I just spent some.
There's one very close to me. He's actually closer than my own breath.
How do you, so you just sort of don't let, they're kind of, it's so funny because, my culture, there's a lot of people who just sort of wax poetic about like, oh, the end of the world.
Mm,
Like,
yes,
and it's just
yes.
it's so funny. Do you just ignore it or how do you deal with it?
The more Zen answer would be to say yes, I ignore it. But yeah, sometimes I get in the muck too. But I I really do recognize more and more that how I show up really is shining a light on the world. So if it is that I am around people who are in a quote unquote lower state of consciousness, um, I lift them up. Oh, hey, well, have you thought about this? Hey, let's breathe for a second. Wait, well, let's just hold on. Like we can revise. You can let them talk even, and then revise the conversation. That's something I do. Oh man, I'll tell you a story right now. It just popped up, and these were two. So I live on this huge farm in Hawaii, and we have work traders, and there were these work traders that came through, and man, they really brought a wave of drama with them. It's just like it was like man, it was like a perfume, and again, remember, it's all states of consciousness. So I knew it wasn't them, it was just the role that they were choosing to play. Okay. So I'm not necessarily offended by their way of being. It's just they don't recognize how powerful they are because if they did, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. That said, I'm not trying to get involved in the drama that they're trying to bring about, right? But I want to be there for them too. Well, I found myself being asked to come to, the table so us as a community could talk and everything. And I was like being this arbitrator between them. And I was like, I don't want to be involved in this. Like, this is not my life. You know what I mean? I love everybody here. I didn't say this at the table. This is what's going on within me. And I was like, you know what? I did my piece in the external world. I'm backing out. Right. I've done, I've done my piece out here. Right. To be that diplomat, if you will. And then I go home. My home is within, right? To the kingdom of God within. And I just release whatever those stories are, the truths that they're all having about each other and myself and them and blah, 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 right?
Mm.
And I actually just like see what I actually want to see. And that was peace. So I was like, all right, cool. Peace. And guess what? Peace came. Interestingly enough, weeks later, more drama came and they tried to literally bring it to me. And I just stood there and was like, well, y'all know my stance on things. And she looks at me and, and she looks at me like, yeah, you're right. And then like walks away and goes back to her drama, literally goes back to it. And I'm just standing there and just being like, and then like 2:00 in the morning, they leave. They just leave the farm. I was like, amazing.
Amazing. I love that.
I didn't tell them to go. In fact, I was like, you're wonderful. You're beautiful. There's no worries here. And they did this. And I was like, I'm sure they have their reason. I know, they're going through their own drama. Yeah, but Jerry, you don't understand. I get it. I know. I get it. But you can, I talk about this stuff openly with people. You can revise. You can go to bed, thinking a different story. And I don't, there's nothing to hide because it's true. Right. And so people then come up to me and they're like, drama. And I'm like, I mean, is that what you want? And they're like, fuck you, Jerry. And they just walk away. Excuse me for cursing. Sorry.
That's so fun. I know people, I think, get really riled up when you tell them that they're responsible for they're definitely responsible for their inner state and how they're feeling and reacting to life.
It's hard to accept.
It's hard to accept. We want to like point the finger outside of us. And okay, so what about like a favorite lecture of Neville's? Like, do you have one in particular that comes up for you?
I often say that my favorite lecture is called True Freedom. And it really came. It's because I love history, and I just have this absolute love for history and how we how we got here. And in it, he opens up and he says, "Today we celebrate the birth of a man who freed the slaves, and next week we celebrate the man who freed us from the British Crown." And yet we have people here in the streets who are protesting, saying, freedom now, give us freedom now. Not realizing that their one true freedom is actually within them. I paraphrase. And it's because he's saying this at the time of like Martin Luther King. He's saying this at the time of RFK. He's saying this in the time of like, Kent State and all this stuff. And he's standing there on the stage telling people, yeah, all that protesting you're protesting for nothing because the thing you're actually looking for is actually within you. That's a hard pill to swallow. Because we are here in 2023 kind of dealing with a lot of the same stuff that was going on back then. And I see a lot of the same thing coming from either end of whatever spectrum you think I'm talking about, and just see that like they themselves are makers of themselves. You're really making your own circumstances in life. You're really perpetuating it. Anyway, so that's the lecture. Sorry, I was going on one right there, but the lecture is One True Freedom. Is that his best lecture? I'm not quite certain, but it really hit me. But I would also say that if you're new to Neville and you're new to what I'm talking about, I would say just look up Imagination Creates Reality. It's this 19-minute video. The YouTube channel is 100K watt or watts, 100K watts, and look up Imagining Creates Reality. It's 19 minutes. It was the video that I heard for the first time. Heard Neville, or at least I should, yeah, Neville's words from his voice for the first time, and he was telling the story of this woman or this girl who had recently lost her father, and it was the holidays, and she's riding the trolley in San Francisco with all the kids, all the little boys and girls on the trolley, laughing and celebrating the holiday, and she's distraught and just feeling sad, right? And she's crying, and then she decides that these weren't the tears, or these weren't the salt of her tears, but the salt of the sea breeze on her cheeks. That that that's what she started imagining. And then a couple weeks later, um, she was given passage to this tropical land. And it blew my mind. And then in that video, he talked about these mental diets, the very things we're talking about here. And then he also moves on to what states of consciousness really are and who you actually are in 19 minutes. And it's a great introduction. It's a good reminder. And yeah, that's my answer.
Amazing. Okay, so imagination creates reality, 100K watts. Well, I'll look it up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you maybe are aware or know of this piece, but I just sort of came across it and it kind of blew my mind, was that Neville's mentor was actually this, I think he was an Ethiopian rabbi called Abdullah.
Abdullah, yeah.
Abdullah.
So yeah, he was a black turbaned Ethiopian rabbi, if Neville's recollection is correct. And Abdullah, I've actually done a lot of research into or not a lot, not as much as some others have, but the story of Abdullah is interesting because this man apparently was a consultant and advisor to a lot of very powerful people back in the early 1900s, and he truly walked the walk if of the law of assumption that he was a powerful man despite being in a segregated U.S. He was able to sit front row and center in the opera houses. Some of the best dignitaries and diplomats came to share space with him, so on and so forth. And he would teach in these lecture halls, and Neville came to meet him. And then he taught Neville Hebrew and other things, but essentially taught Neville this one principle that you already are in Barbados, which is to say you already are in the place that you say you want to be. Because Neville, you have to get into Neville's story. I don't want to belabor that because we're talking about Ab. But the story of Ab, hey, I think it's more fable by this point in 2023 than anything. I think he was a real person, but there's so little information about him that I can only glean that when Neville spoke about him, he would speak about him because there was a lot of black people who would come to Neville's lectures that struggled with dealing with the quote unquote color of their skin and the barriers for entry into the life that they wanted because of the color of their skin. And he would point out that Abdullah was his teacher, that Abdullah was able to sit in front row and center, and that Abdullah was brazenly impudent no matter what anybody had to say, to the point to where anybody moved when he walked in a room. And so, the biggest lesson that I get from the Abdullah story is that doesn't matter your skin color, doesn't matter your sex, doesn't matter your country, if you are hearing my voice right now, you can do and be and have whatever you choose to do, be, and have. And as a matter of fact, you have always been doing that. You are doing that, and you will continue to do that until you realize that you are doing it. And
Mm.
that's the story of Ab.
Mm. So interesting. Oh, so interesting. I also I went down the rabbit hole searching for more information about this guy because he was pretty revolutionary for, I think it was like the 1920s,
Hmm.
right? And just the state of assumption and the state one has to be in order to kind of move through life, even if the consensus is saying one thing, right? Just really
Correct.
powerful.
That said, if you really want to dive deeper on Abdullah, it sounds like you're curious. I would go and check out a gentleman named Walter C. Lanyon. He wrote a book called "It Was Told of a Certain Potter," and I think it. I'm why I'm blanking on this name.
I actually just bought that book. It was just so
Oh.
funny. Yeah. I just bought it. So I heard about him through a woman named Candace. I think she has an
Oh yeah, that's one of my good friends.
Okay, amazing. Oh wow.
Oh
Well,
wow.
that makes sense. You both live in Hawaii.
Well, actually, we knew each other before I lived in Hawaii. Yeah, because we're students of Neville, so you kind of run into each other, you know.
Oh, amazing. Wow, small world.
Yeah,
um
she was actually at my son's baby shower, and yeah, she's you want to talk, you want to interview somebody. I highly recommend interviewing her. Oh my
okay.
God, I could not recommend anybody better.
Okay, well, I'll ask for her info after the conversation. I would love to.
Very good. I'm feeling I'm having such a good time right now. So apologies if I'm off the rail.
No, no, likewise, likewise. I think it's so interesting, like when you really know who you are, like life becomes like this like hilarious cosmic joke. I'm like, well, this is just fun,
Hmm.
and we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. But Jerry, to go back to, because we're almost at time and I really want to focus on the stories where maybe one story or so that you've helped people with some of this work. And, I'm just curious, like, it would be fun for the audience to kind of hear the journey of that, or like how you were able to shift or to help people kind of shift through a limitation or move into a different state or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories. I mean, I'll tell somebody else's stories. I like speaking from experience. Yes, I've coached people, but because I didn't live their day to day, it's really hard to explain it. But I can explain results of working on this from this perspective of some of my clients. So there was one gentleman that I worked with who he was in real estate. He was already, as far as I'm concerned, pretty successful as a real estate agent. But COVID hit, and it really knocked him down. He didn't see any coming out of it, to the point to where he was actually looking at doing different work. He was already dealing with like low self esteem amongst his circle of friends. Uh, it, he really wanted to stop smoking weed, and make that type of shift, and he wanted to be creative. That was one thing. He was just, I would love to be creative, but I can't, man, because I have this corporate ladder and all this type of stuff. And I would say to him, "It's like, dude, you have to understand, like, start assuming that you already are this person." And as we worked together for like 12 weeks, and as we worked together, slowly and surely he started making these shifts, and he started just making different changes. He started taking different actions. He started just seeing like his employer and his fellow coworkers differently. He started seeing his clients differently, so on and so forth. He had set a when we started working together, he had set a goal. Uh, I don't like giving numbers, but he had set a certain goal that he wanted to hit originally for the year, and I challenged him to increase the goal, because it was like, wait a minute, why would you just assume that? Why don't you just assume bigger than you could have imagined? And he was like, no, man, I mean, I couldn't do that. I was like, that's why I want you to do it, because you need to see that you actually can do what you think you can't do. And he's like, all right. And he goes and does it. He sets the number that he wanted to achieve, or the increased number that he wanted to achieve. And then we got done. We got done with our sessions together. And as a caveat, I should also note, once you're done working with me, I don't want to work with you anymore.
Right.
Once we're done, we're done. So I let him go, and we did a check back about like 4 or 5 months later, and he's like, Jerry, his life absolutely shifted. He became who's who of Chicago real estate. He superseded the goal, the extra goal that we had set. He became like the leader in his friends group. He started going to church again. Was dating, which was an impossibility in his eyes beforehand, and the content that he would put out on the internet was hilarious. Absolutely creative stuff. You should see his Christmas cards; they're hilarious, and 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 it was all within him. I didn't tell him to do any of those things. I just kept pointing him to who he is and how this law works. And once you get it, man, you don't you really understand who you are. It was amazing, and I love him. I don't want to say his name. I love him to death, and I follow him on Instagram. And I'm like, look at him go, So, and of course, he's probably living his life. He probably has his ups and downs, but I can see he knows who he is.
Amazing. I love that last comment. Like, he knows who he is, and I think that's really what this work comes down to. It's like, I think, was it Abdullah or Neville who said, "I know who I am." Like, I know the magnificence of who I really am, and therefore, everything in life is different because I know who I am. I don't, need to take reality at its face value. Super interesting story. Thank you for sharing that. So, Jerry, what sorts of things have surprised you the most on this journey looking back?
Oh man. I think the biggest surprise is how little of myself I saw myself. Um, I mean, I realized that I saw myself so little, but until I realized that I was creating this for myself, I it was shocking. It really was shocking because it mm, I realized how much I didn't want to take responsibility for my life. I realized that like playing small sucks. I think the biggest surprise really is recognizing that I actually am one with God. I know that sounds a little off. We didn't really talk about him in this podcast, but the biggest surprise is waking up to that I really am one with him. I really am a child of his. And he gave us this amazing gift, which is the ability to imagine and create.
Mm. Wow, I love that. I love that. Um, so, Jerry, what do you want to tell our listeners about their well-being? What's kind of like your main takeaway, your call to action? What do you want people to do after they listen to this conversation?
Well, what I'd love them to do is follow me. I would love a follow on Instagram, and I share a lot of content there. And I share my story. I share what I'm up to. Share my work with clients, and I want to know you. I want to know how like how it's impacting your life, and I want to hear your story so we can share that with other people so they know, because it's like podcasts like this, it's content creation, it's the interaction that we're having on the internet that's really helping people um yeah, dive deep, get it curious and all that good stuff, so uh yeah, follow me. I would love a follow on Instagram. It's at human imagination, I should say. It's at human dot imagination. um that's what I would really appreciate.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, great. So human dot imagination on Instagram. Are there any other resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you and your work, or is Instagram like the central hub?
Instagram for now is the central hub. I try to be minimal. I try to do Clubhouse as well, where you can come in and have just a nice talk with me. I also do free first Thursday. So every first Thursday of the month, I just do a Q&A where people can come in and ask their questions, whether it's about Neville, Abdullah, the law, or any other teacher that's out there. And I think yeah, if you human dot imagination.
Human time. Amazing, amazing. Okay, so we'll leave that in the show notes that people can find that. But
Mhm.
Jerry, thank you so much for your time. This was so lovely. And please, for those listening, check out Jerry's Instagram live. All of his talks are so interesting and so fascinating, and he's the real deal. So I'm a big fan. Check him out. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, Jerry.
My pleasure, Yasmin. You were an amazing host. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about Neville Goddard and the art of manifestation with Jerry Emeka. And you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.